The psychology of manipulation. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like somehow you lost? Not because the other person was right, but because by the end of it, you started questioning your own memory, your own judgment, even your own feelings, if that sounds familiar. You may have been manipulated. Here's something fascinating. Psychologists have found that manipulation is rarely obvious. The most effective manipulators don't control people through force or threats. They do it subtly, by influencing how you think, how you feel, and ultimately, the decisions you make. The most unsettling part, many people don't realize they're being manipulated until weeks, months, or even years later. So why are some people so good at controlling others? What psychological tactics do manipulators use without you even noticing? And perhaps most importantly, how can you recognize manipulation before it takes control of your decisions? By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychology behind manipulation, why the human brain is vulnerable to it, the warning signs psychologists look for, and several research-backed strategies to protect yourself without becoming suspicious of everyone around you. Welcome back to the channel, or if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm a psychologist, and today we're exploring one of the most misunderstood aspects of human behavior, the psychology of manipulation. We'll examine why manipulation works, the science behind influence and persuasion, a real story from my practice, and practical strategies that can help you recognize unhealthy manipulation while building stronger psychological boundaries. If understanding the hidden mechanics of the human mind is something you care about, make sure you're subscribed, because every week we explore the psychology behind behavior, relationships, emotions, and the invisible forces that shape our lives. Now, let's begin with one simple question. Why is the human brain so easy to manipulate? In one widely cited survey on workplace and relationship dynamics, researchers found that a striking majority of adults report having been in at least one relationship, romantic, familial, or professional, where they later realized, often only in hindsight, that they had been manipulated in ways that left them questioning their own judgment, their own memory, even their own sanity. The unsettling part isn't that manipulation exists. Most people already suspect that. The unsettling part is how rarely it's recognized while it's actually happening. Let's start with a foundational distinction, because it changes everything about how you spot manipulation, the difference between influence and manipulation. Influence is transparent. It appeals openly to your genuine interests, your values, or the actual merits of a situation, and it leaves your ability to reason clearly intact. Manipulation, by contrast, works by deliberately bypassing your rational evaluation. It relies on confusion, pressure, guilt, or distorted information to produce a decision you might not make if you were thinking clearly and had complete, accurate information. The single clearest marker separating the two isn't how nice or unpleasant the interaction feels in the moment. It's whether your ability to think clearly and access accurate information was respected or deliberately undermined. One of the most well-documented manipulation tactics is something researchers and clinicians often call gaslighting, a term that's become popularized but is frequently misunderstood. True gaslighting isn't simply disagreement or having a different memory of an event. It's the persistent, deliberate denial of someone's clearly accurate perception or memory, repeated over time, specifically to make that person doubt their own grip on reality. What makes this particularly damaging is that human memory genuinely is imperfect and somewhat malleable, which means a determined gaslighter is exploiting something real about how brains work. Repeated confident denial really can shift another person's confidence in their own accurate recollection, especially when it comes from someone they trust or depend on. A second well-studied tactic is intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism we've discussed in other contexts on this channel, where unpredictable warmth mixed with unpredictable coldness creates a far stronger psychological pull than consistent treatment in either direction would. Manipulators, whether consciously strategic or simply repeating learned patterns, often use this rhythm instinctively. Periods of charm and validation, followed by withdrawal or criticism, which keeps the other person working harder for approval, second-guessing themselves, and staying engaged in a way that consistent kindness or consistent coldness alone never would. A third tactic, called DARVO in clinical literature, stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. When confronted about harmful behavior, The manipulator denies it occurred, attacks the credibility or character of the person raising the concern, and then reframes the situation so that they themselves appear to be the actual victim. This pattern is remarkably consistent across documented cases and is part of why people who raise legitimate concerns about manipulative behaviour so often end up apologising. Even when they were the one who was wronged, the entire structure of the exchange gets flipped before they've had a chance to process what happened. A fourth tactic worth naming is selective information control, where a manipulator deliberately withholds, distorts, or strategically times information specifically to engineer a particular decision, rather than allowing the other person complete, accurate information to reason from. This might look like exaggerating consequences to pressure a quick decision, omitting relevant context that would change someone's choice, or strategically timing a request for when the other person is too tired or emotionally depleted to evaluate it clearly. If any of this is resonating with you so far, go ahead and drop a comment telling me which of these patterns you've recognized, either in a relationship you've experienced or one you've observed. I read through these regularly, and if this video is helping you see something clearly that's felt confusing for a long time, take a second to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need to recognize this. I want to tell you about a patient I worked with. I'll call her Camille. She was 38 years old, a project coordinator, who came to me deeply confused about a close friendship that had been leaving her feeling exhausted and anxious for nearly 2 years, despite the friend frequently telling her how much their bond meant to them. As we worked through specific incidents together, a clear pattern emerged. Whenever Camille expressed a boundary or a concern, the friend would deny ever having said the thing being referenced, then pivot to listing all the ways Camille had supposedly let her down in the past, leaving Camille apologising profusely by the end of nearly every conversation, regardless of who had actually raised the original concern. Camille had never had language for this pattern. She simply experienced it as constant, low-grade confusion, and the persistent feeling that she must be the unreasonable one. Once we identified this as a textbook deny-attack reverse pattern combined with inconsistent warmth, something shifted for Camille immediately. She stopped assuming the confusion meant something was wrong with her perception and started recognizing it as a predictable structure she could actually name and respond to differently. So here's what actually helps with recognizing and protecting yourself from this. The first tool is documentation. And it sounds almost clinical, but it's remarkably powerful. When you notice a confusing pattern in a relationship, write down specifically what was said and what happened, as close to the actual event as possible. This directly counters gaslighting's mechanism, because it gives you an external, accurate record to check your perception against, rather than relying solely on memory, which can be worn down by repeated confident denial over time. The second tool is what's sometimes called the broken record technique. When faced with deny-attack reverse dynamics, you calmly restate the original concern without getting pulled into defending yourself against the counter-accusations being raised. Something like, "I hear that you're upset about that, and I still want to talk about what I originally raised." This interrupts the redirection these patterns rely on to work. The third tool is building in a deliberate pause before any significant decision someone is pressuring you to make quickly. A simple, non-negotiable rule, like, "I don't make decisions like this on the spot. I'll get back to you tomorrow," removes the time pressure that selective information control and urgency tactics depend on to bypass your clear thinking. A fourth and particularly important tool is consulting an outside perspective, someone with no stake in the relationship, when you notice persistent confusion or self-doubt around a specific person. Manipulation tends to thrive in isolation, and a trusted outside perspective can often see a pattern clearly that's genuinely difficult to see from inside the confusion it creates. Now, an important caution here: recognizing these patterns is genuinely empowering, but if you're in a relationship involving these dynamics that also includes any element of threat, control over your finances, or movement, or fear for your physical safety, that moves beyond what self-help strategies alone can safely address, and it's important to involve a licensed mental health professional, and where relevant, domestic violence or safety resources specifically trained to help you navigate that kind of situation safely. So let's bring this together. Manipulation works by deliberately bypassing clear thinking rather than appealing to it, often through gaslighting's erosion of trust in your own memory, intermittent reinforcement's addictive pull between warmth and withdrawal, the deny-attack reverse pattern that flips legitimate concerns back onto the person raising them, and selective information control that engineers decisions through pressure or omission rather than honesty. None of this means you're naive or foolish for having missed it. These tactics are specifically designed to be difficult to spot from inside the relationship. By documenting confusing incidents as they happen, using the broken record technique to stay anchored to your original concern, building in deliberate pauses before pressured decisions, and consulting trusted outside perspectives, you give yourself real, practical tools for recognizing manipulation far earlier than most people otherwise would. If this video helped you see something more clearly, I have a follow-up video right after this one on exactly how chronic stress reshapes the brain over time. And I think you'll find it just as worth your time, so go ahead and click through to that next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming, and if someone in your life needs to hear this today, take a moment to send it their way. If you're struggling, please don't hesitate to reach out to one. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.